every peoples. Welcome back to the D&D 3.5 book club, the book club where we talk about all things 3.5 and 3.5 adjacent. Today, I am joined by my co-host, Lonnie Morris. Lonnie, how you doing?
I'm doing really good today. And we have a guest.
We do indeed. Today, we are joined by a very good friend of mine and a gamer that both Lonnie and I have played with. I've been rolling dice with Charles for what, about 15 years or so now. Um, we are joined with, or we are joined by today, Charles. Charles, how you doing?
I'm doing good, thank you. Hello, hello.
And as always, I'm Cliff, and today we have a what I think is an interesting topic. We're going to be going over pre-published or pre-written modules for D&D 3.0 and 3.5, specifically Return to the Temple of Elemental Evil. Now, recently, I was able to run this entire module. I've wanted to run it. I think I bought it back in, I want to say 2009 or 2010, and I just never got a chance to run it. Like, I got the physical copy and all that. And just last year, I was finally able to run it. It went on for close to a year. It was a long module. And I have a lot to say about it. Charles, you were a player in that game. Lonnie, you have gone through the moat house of that game. So, I think there's a lot to say, and I also think that we'll be getting into, a lot of different a lot of kind of different modules as well, and a lot of different, a lot of kind of modular history, like current Paizo and current modules, and how those built on previous modules as well. But really quick, I think I'd like to kind of start off today with an addition from our mailbag. So occasionally we do get messages, and today we had a pretty good message, and I wanted to kind of touch on it. So this guy, I believe his name is John Tapp, Johntappe. So he asked us, what 3.5 material would we use in a 5e game? So I think, Lonnie, if you don't mind, I'll kind of start off with you. What kind of stuff do you think you would bring from 3.5 to a 5e game, if any, if you were going to run a 5e game?
Okay, so we kind of discussed this. I believe it's just something that's like really because in 3.5 amongst my favorite books that exists is the Psionics Handbook, the expanded Psionics Handbook for 3.5. I think that in 5th edition they really did psionics dirty by kind of just making them subclasses, and I know that that's mostly because the way 5e does classes in general is they didn't want to have 100 different classes. They wanted to have the 10 core classes or whatever it is nowadays, and they just wanted to have the subclasses. But I think it was a missed opportunity to bring the soul knife and the scion and a couple of other little things to 5th edition. And I think that if you did away with making like the rogue, the soul knife out of a rogue, or the wizard out of a scion, and kind of gave them their own classes, it would have been a big bonus to 5e as a general whole.
100%. I mean, I'm right there with you. Actually, I have something to piggyback on that a little bit. So my favorite class combination of all time in 3.5 and Pathfinder is Ranger, Bard, Arcane Archer. I love that class combination. It's so good. Like, I've played it before. It's completely insane. But when I played an Arcane Archer in 5e, it's a fighter subtype.
Oof.
right? So it's basically just treated like a fighter, and you don't get any spells, you don't get any really arcane abilities. You just get like,
Then why is it an arcane archer? I'm
well,
confused.
you get um a couple like magic arrows that you can fire, and they can do different things, which is all well and good, but it just like you don't have the versatility that you have in, from previous editions.
Yeah,
Um,
okay.
and you also don't have, okay, so like if you're a Ranger Bard Arcane Archer, there's so much you can do. You got the Bard stuff, you got the Ranger stuff. In 5e, if you're an Arcane Archer, you're just a fighter with a bow. Like that's it.
You're just a dex fighter, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, and really, like I was looking at it and I wanted to be an Arcane Archer so much, but as I was looking at it, I was just looking at like the Valor Bard, and I should have just been a Valor Bard. There was nothing in the Arcane Archer that would have made me like better than just a Valor Bard. The Valor Bard did what the Arcane Archer should have done.
Huh.
So like if I
Uh,
want to be this thing, I have to be a different thing and then just call it a different thing.
yeah, and not to bash on 5e, I do it all the time. I've done it almost every single episode we've made so far. I've bashed 5e a little bit here and there. Uh, and I guess I'm doing it again, but I've noticed that that's a problem with 5e is that in really I guess it's a systemic problem going back to 3.5, where there's always a class that just does what you want to do but better. Like, um real quick, going into 3.5, there's battle mages, right? Which are mages that get lowered, they get lower arcade failures for wearing armor, and they can get long swords and cast their spells and stuff. But really, warlock does it better. Why wouldn't you just be a warlock? uh oh, you want to be a spellcaster in general. Well, you've got sorcerer, you got wizard. Well, wizard just does it better. And this is my hot take on that. So uh I feel like balances and making classes feel unique and good in their own right has always been a problem for Wizards of the Coast.
Yeah, absolutely. And with 3.5, I think it was doubly difficult just because there there got to be this point where there was just a saturation of classes to where like there was, I don't even know how many classes there were in 3.5 and 3.0. Like if you totaled them all up, there must have been like over 100.
I know that for a fact there was some classes that were just duplicates. There were multiple classes of samurai from different books and multiple classes of ninja from different books. There was two separate ninjas, and each of them had completely different level 1 to 20 progressions. And that's
Crazy.
not even counting the prestige classes.
That is true. So it was a lot. So, I can kind of see where 5e is coming from there. But I guess the takeaway from that would be, if if I were going to run 5e and I were going to make something cool like a Scion, I would want to have more options.
Right. It would be nice to be like, because like you could have done the Scion, right? And then have the Scion have its class progressions be Scion Wilder or Scion, the different subcategories of magic casting that they have, kind of like a wizard does, right? With their schools. uh it's still, Scion was enough of a class that it didn't need to be a subclass of something else. It needed to have its own subclasses. And just because I want to pick on him a little bit because he's kind of being quiet over there. Do you have anything to add to this, Charles?
Uh, I think that could be for 3.5. I think a good discussion at some point might be the talk about like kind of power creep that happened kind of late in 3.5, where you do get all this class bloat, and the power skill of those classes and whatnot.
Yeah,
Um,
that I do think that is something that 5e has successfully, I guess, sidestepped, because 5e definitely doesn't have class bloat.
I feel like, but I feel like 5e has the opposite problem of class bloat because, like, I don't know,
Class
and
famine.
yeah, I was looking at it when the girlfriend was like, "Hey, I play D&D," and I was like, "Yes, a girl that plays D&D, this is gonna be awesome." And she's like, "Come play 5e with me with my group," and I was like, I've never played 5e. I'm a 3.5 guy. That's my niche. But D&D is D&D. It can't be that bad. It can't be fourth edition. So I went ahead and I tried to like make my character. I was looking at it, I was like, man, really, you should just be a fighter or a wizard. Like it just felt like fighter did all the things that ranger did, but better because it had better damage scaling and a number of attacks per round. Uh, Warrior did everything that Monk did, but better because it had better attacks, damage, and better attacks, more attacks per round. And like Wizard was just like, oh, I have infinite cantrips, and I can just and my all of my spells scale all the way to 20, and it just felt and like I can just make them better by spending higher spell slots, which I guess is just meta magic feats. But like, I don't know, it just felt really, really wonky to me that it was just like, really, you don't need a bard when you could play a rogue. You don't need a warrior or like a monk when you could, or a ranger when you could play a warrior. You don't need a paladin when you can play a cleric. Or I mean, you don't, I don't. It just felt really like a lot of the classes lost their uh identity and usability in fifth edition.
Yeah.
I have an interesting story about my first fifth edition game. Um, in it, we started at level 20, and I, if first game 20th level character, I had no problem. I was playing 20th level paladin, and you know, the modifiers and everything like that, like it was, compared to playing like a 12th level paladin in 3.5 or um, Pathfinder, it was much simpler. And at first, I was like, oh, the 20th level character first time, um, but the system was simple, which is part of its appeal. Um, and
Yeah, I
It's
like to call it
really interesting.
baby's first tabletop.
I, that actually kind of ties into what I would adapt from 3.5 or Pathfinder and the like into fifth edition. Actually, two of my players that I have in my current game that I'm running uh, came over from fifth edition, and one of them uh, game masters for fifth edition, and this was their first experience with it. And we've actually talked about what he's taking from um, the edition we're playing into his games, and we've talked about and stuff like that. And the big one is magical items. There's a lot more magical items in the not just 3.5 but earlier editions, and you can read those descriptions, and a lot of them, especially the very unique ones, not like the pluses and the extra damage, because that's that you can do that, but it takes more work to balance it over. But there's a lot of really cool magical items and effects that you can grab and uh, port into your fifth edition game, and that'd be where I'd be looking. Like, get one of the equipment books, look through it, um, get some, take out some magical items, and a lot of them would work for fifth edition. You could have some cool, unique items for your homebrew games.
Yeah, I was actually I had a very similar issue when I run during my first game of fifth edition. I was looking at wizards and I was like, where's the enchantment stuff? Like it seemed really hard to make your own magical items. And then I went to play and I went through and I played through Baldur's Gate, and I was playing through Baldur's Gate and I was seeing all these items that had all these restrictions, like you can deal an extra 1d4 damage with this particular sword. It deals an extra 1d4 intoxication damage or whatever, but only if the target is already webbed and you're playing a drow while wielding this particular sword. And I was like, that's a lot of modify. One, you have to be a drow. That's a class, so that only works for either your main character, if you made your character a drow, or one character in the game. And then on top of that, the character has to be webbed for you to get 1d4 extra poison damage. Like, and I took that to Reddit, and Reddit was like, dude, that's just how magical items are in fifth edition. And I was disgusted. I was like, dude, fifth, like, where do you get your damage creep? Like, because in 3.5, your damage creep comes from magical weapons. You get flame weapon, that's an extra 1d6. That's a +1 modifier on your sword. Oh, you get flame burst, that's an extra 3d6 on your sword. Like, where's the extra damage coming from, like, in fifth edition? And I think what you're saying about taking magical items from 3.5, even if you're not taking, flame burst and your generic power creep weapons from 3.5, a book called the Magic Item Compendium is full of just really unique, cool magical items that I feel are just better than fifth edition's magic items, and would give unique, cool things like spider silk armor, the ability to, climb walls and stuff. Just interesting little, like, artifacts and enchanted items from the book of the Magic Item Compendium that would be great in fifth edition.
I absolutely agree. And not just the Magic Item Compendium, but really any edition of D&D, or Pathfinder, or almost any game out there, is going to have those really good splat books, like the Arms and Equipment Guide, the Magic Item Compendium, like just equipment stuff. And a lot of that equipment, you can just take, like, you can use it in any edition. So let's say you get like I remember there was a weapon in 3.5 called the Kapesh, and it's like a sword with a hook at the end. And
Yep.
you could use it to make trip attacks. Well, I mean, 5e has trip attacks, right? So
Right.
so you can just put it right in there. You don't have to do anything.
Right. And then, I mean, like, and generally speaking, weapons in 5e do the same damage they do in 3.5. A long sword's still going to deal 1d8 damage. You know what I mean? So you can reasonably assume that if you grab the Arms and Equipment Guide and you flip through a page, you come to the Kasuri Gama, it's still going to have a mace, like a little club on one end that deals 1d6 bludgeoning, or a blade that deals 1d4 slicing and has the option to make trip attacks. Like, it's not unreasonable that weapons and stuff from 3.5's Arms and Equipment Guide would make it into fifth edition.
Absolutely. And so Charles, I think that was just like, that was spot on. That was great. That was a really good observation. And for myself personally, I had a very small one. I would say that if I was going to run a 5e game, now there is actually a 5e module that I would really like to run, and that's Princes of the Apocalypse. So if you know anything about Princes of the Apocalypse, it's kind of the updated Temple of Elemental Evil for 5e. And if I was going to run that, then I would take the module that we're going to talk about today, Return to the Temple of Elemental Evil, and I would just steal from it. Like, I would steal the prestige classes, I would steal the setting, the source material. I would go through the story and I would pick out the parts that I like, and I would kind of, update those. I would, pick something in there that really stands out to me, and I would put that into the 5e game. However, this probably isn't the first book that I would use if I was going to update, or if I was going to, run Princes of the Apocalypse. Really, like, if I was going to run Princes of the Apocalypse, I would go back and I would use the original Temple of Elemental Evil by Gary Gygax. I would play through the Temple of Elemental Evil video game with the Circle of 8 mod pack and the Temple Plus mod, which, just kind of side note, if you guys have not played the Temple of Elemental Evil computer game by Troika with the Circle of 8 mod pack and the Temple Plus mod, it is amazing. It is super 3.5 goodness. If you're ever Jones in for some 3.5, it's just it's the best. But I would play through that, or I would use the Goodman Games updated Temple of Elemental Evil. Really, that's probably the one that I would use, because what Goodman Games does is they have the original version that's kind of like updated, and they have the 5e version, and they come together. So I would probably do that if I was going to run Princes of the Apocalypse.
That's kind of funny that you say that you would steal things from it, because um I'm not, like, as far as fifth edition goes or 3.5 goes, I'm not super familiar with any pre-made modules. uh I'm more of a go at your own flow kind of guy. But there is it's something from a Ravenloft box set that was given to me by a cousin when I was really little. And I remember like reading through the book of it before it got taken by a different cousin of mine who was slightly older, um who I was delivering it to. And I was just reading through the book, and there's this one trap that I always like to use. It's really it's kind of goofy, but it's essentially just a Medusa head over a bowl, and there's a door, right? And so you've got like, and you're like, well, try to figure it out, right? And so, you know, they always want to look at the Medusa head or like mess with the Medusa head to try to open the door. And if they're doing that, then they catch, you know, petrification saves to like or whatever. But if they look at like the bowl of the sink or whatever, and they make a good spot check, they'll notice there's blood flakes around the opening of the bowl. And the goal is to get them to like cut themselves for like 1d4 damage and bleed into the bowl, and the door opens, and the head closes all its eyes or whatever. But like that's just like a trap that has been in that, like, I remember from a particular module, what from way back in the day, that I reuse constantly. And so it was just like, it's one of those things that you're like, I would just it's something I stole and I just reuse it myself all the time.
That is awesome. And so to answer your question, John Tap or John Tape, um, yeah, there is no shortage of stuff to steal from 3.5 or earlier editions. You can just take it all wholesale and put it right into your 5e game. A lot of the times, you know, without any work at all. But you know, with a little bit of tweaking, you can just, I mean, you can take anything you want, just put it right in there.
Yep. A lot of, many, there's many things to take traps. That's another good one. You just have to change the, the DCs or the like to reflect the challenge rating that you're going for. And especially a lot of the puzzle ones like that one. That's really great to put into any game. Just be careful about if you run with multiple groups of people, not to accidentally use the same trap twice against the same player.
Just run in there is like, I'm gonna sidestep around this particular corridor. What? No, that's out of character knowledge. You can't do that. It's like, yeah, I can.
Is there any reason why I can't?
Yeah, this is what my character would have done anyway.
Yeah.
You're gonna walk down that corridor and just get stabbed by spears that come out of the wall. Okay,
yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah. All right, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, see you next week. Or maybe not.
Or not.
So I think that was awesome. That was nice, and we'll continue to do this little mailbag, you know, section. If we get any questions, you know, feel free to reach out to us, and we'll you know, we will try to answer your questions to the best of our ability. But for today, I'd like to kind of get into the meat and potatoes of today's episode, which is the Temple of Elemental Evil, or Return to the Temple of Elemental Evil, and other 3.5 and 3.0 modules. So I'd like to kind of start out by listing a little bit of information about this module. So this module, much like most things, 3.0, was kind of developed and written by Monty Cook. it came out in, when did it come out? It was very early in 2001. It came out in 2001. And I'd like to read the plot summary really quick. So the plot summary for Return to the Temple of Elemental Evil is as such. The player characters must foil the plans of the cultists of Tharizdun, who have again occupied the temple. The cultists are attempting to restore each of the 4 elemental nodes and release the princes of elemental evil to bring destruction and chaos to the surrounding area. By doing so, the princes would weaken Tharizdun's bonds, period. To summon the princes, Tharizdun's followers operate within the cult of the Elder Elemental Eye. So that's the plot summary. To me, even that plot summary was slightly confusing. And I guarantee you that if you try to make sense of what is happening in this module, good luck. Because for me, I had to just throw it all away. Like, I had to just throw the story away and completely rebuild it from scratch. And I've kind of noticed that whenever I look online for Return to the Temple of Elemental Evil, there's only a couple reviews that I found. One of them is okay. The rest are scathing. And there's only one YouTube video that I found on Return to the Temple of Elemental Evil. And the guy is just going off on it. Just, nothing good to say at all. Just slagging this module. Which, I mean, I don't think he's in the wrong for doing so necessarily. But the reason I wanted to talk about this today is because I think that there is a lot that you can use here, and there's a lot of really good stuff in this book, just maybe not, to be run as written. So I'm going to go ahead and take you guys over to a review by a guy named Alan D. Kohler, and this is an RPG.net review. I'll link it in the show notes. So this is what he has to say about Return to the Temple of Elemental Evil. So he rates it. He's got each of these on a scale of 1 to 5. So
can we bring this up on the
yeah, absolutely.
This...
I will go ahead and share my screen. Sharing the screen. Can you guys see screen share?
Yes, sir.
All right, super cool. Okay, so ready to use material. He rates that as a 5, and he says, outstanding. There are new creatures, new magic items, new spells, new domains, new prestige classes, full color maps, good keys, large variety of solid and creative NPCs and other encounters. I absolutely agree. I agree wholeheartedly with that. Just really quick, I'd like to kind of show you guys in the PDF here. So this book is close to 200 pages long, and almost all of it are encounters. So if you look at all of these are all encounters. These are all encounters. These are all encounters. So that's a really awesome picture.
Wait, is this the scene where I betrayed everybody?
No, that was a different game, but that is really cool, and it is fairly fairly similar. So just look at all these encounters. Then you go down here, and then when you get to the last part of the book, the appendix, it's got all the stats. All the stats for all of the crazy stuff that you meet in this game. So look at that. There's this this person here, Meridosin, female, half-elf, fighter, 3. So that's a 3rd level fighter right there. You need a 3rd level fighter, bam. Got the whole stat block, all the possessions.
We got Elmo, the level 6 ranger over here.
Yep, Elmo, the level 6 ranger. He is a recruitable character in the original Temple of Elemental Evil. Really interesting character. And like, yeah, just look at that. They've got all these stat blocks. Like, you never have to roll up a random NPC again, ever.
Oh, this is crazy. This is so good. I'm I'm gonna need the link to this PDF
Oh yeah, I'll get
because
it to you.
uh you have no idea how often I'm like, oh man, I really need a generic, whatever, um fighter or generic bartender guy to like, you know, who's, maybe got a couple levels in bar or something dumb, like uh and I don't like, and then the PCs try to kill him, so I'm in the middle of trying to make him a stat block, like, or whatever, when he was just supposed to be someone they talk to and go upon their way.
Yep. And you never have to do that again. If you have this PDF, you just shoot over to it, grab something of the appropriate challenge rating, and boom, it's in your game. And look at this. This guy over here, he's a cleric. It's got all of his spells, all the spells he has prepared. It's got his domains. It's got what those do. Possessions. He's got a ring of protection. He's got a potion of stone skin. It's just like it makes your job so much easier as a DM to just have like almost 200 encounters from level 4 to 14 just on tap.
um One thing I would say is that it's great that they do have the loot for these encounters as well, like built into them. Um, but you got to be careful with that kind of stuff because, like, if you're just giving your players everything from every bad guy that drops, uh, there becomes this power creep of wealth to character level that's just where you could buy stuff that makes things just a cakewalk. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Yeah,
you've got to be careful not to become a Monty Hall DM.
yeah, and tip for game masters: if you find that you've given your party too many magic items, um, what I do is you kind of give them quests that kind of turns off that that wealth tap for a while. Send them, have them have reasons to go after, monsters that logically wouldn't have any items. Just just kind of lower, instead of just taking those magic items away, you can just let them keep that stuff and just have them use those same magic items for a while until you feel that they are, back down to where they should be, and then start introducing magic items and wealth again.
Yeah, see, that's a really good idea. Like a lot of DMs I find, um, not you, Cliff, you're great. But a lot of
That's
DMs
debatable.
out there will do things like, oh, well, I don't like that axe you have, so this monster has greater disjunction or something at its disposal, and it's just going to remove all the enchantments from your axe and make it useless again. Um, and I feel like that's rude almost. I mean, it's one thing when you're like playing epic level, level 25 characters, and you've got a guy with a great scythe who can literally one shot the entire party, and he attacks somebody, and you're like, oh, well, that guy was wearing armor that had greater dispel on it, so your weapon's now a regular great scythe with no enchantments. Um, but it's an entirely different story, when they're like level 5 and 6, and they're like, man, I got a +2 sword. This is awesome. And you're like, oh, it got disenchanted because it was beating everything that I was throwing at it. Like, so just that was a really good observation. Let them feel strong, but maybe not make any wealth for a little while off of app instead of just punishing them for getting good stuff.
In one of my early 3.5 games, and I think probably my longest running, I gave the players, they had they were facing orcs, and the orc leader had a +1 flaming short sword, and they killed him and got it, and they used that short sword for like the rest of the campaign. They were quite attached to it, and on paper, it's a, with the flame enchantment, it's just basically a +2 weapon, which is huge. But mechanical wise, it's not that much better than, let's say a great sword as far as like damage go. It's still 2d6 damage with, +1. So it was still a lot, but um, it wasn't so broken that was outrageous, and they also didn't get anything else for a while. And then they used this weapon. This was the weapon that one particular player used for quite a while before getting something better. So
I
don't be
mean,
yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, you don't have to be shy about giving the player something cool at the beginning either. They micro attach to it and love it. But
Maybe later on it becomes a legendary weapon,
yeah,
foreshadowing.
yeah, or
Um,
yeah.
but that's actually really funny because I don't know who here's played Baldur's Gate 3, but anybody who's played it more than once knows that you can at the very beginning of the game when you're just getting started, there's a demon you can fight who's got a giant great sword, flaming, probably one of the best weapons in the game, hands down. And you can get that at the start of the game by making him drop it and picking it up. Um, and it is I still use it. I still have a character who's we're going into Act 3 and who's still using it, still rocking it. So even in like Baldur's Gate 3, like they show you it's okay to give people a strong weapon. Like just there's just not going to be that many other ones that come around. So don't be afraid.
Yeah, and like especially if that strong weapon comes with a downside. Like you took this weapon from a demon and he wants it back
Well, yeah,
and he
that's
knows
always
where it
fun.
is. So that'd be really
Yeah.
cool. So I think that was an awesome observation. And in 3.5, I think that would also be a really good opportunity to introduce the book Weapons of Legacy. So that
Yeah, that's what I was trying to hint at.
yeah, that would be awesome.
We're going to
So
be talking about that one in a couple weeks.
oh
So
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. That's a great book, just full of crazy stuff. Um, so kind of back to the review, he goes on to idea content. He rates this a 3 out of 5. So he says, though there are a few gems, overall, I felt that the dungeon crawl feel was overbearing and that players were funneled in places and that the Crater Ridge mines could easily become a tedious stream of encounters, which it did, and it was. And Charles, this is really where I want to get some of your thoughts because you slogged through those mines. Um, we didn't even use half of them. Like, I don't even know how many sessions we were in those mines, and we didn't even cover half of it.
Yeah, we were still in there for really good chunk of time, and you see that occasionally in 3.5 and some older modules as well. They just have these huge extensions without really a lot else going on
um
other than the slug.
yeah, Cliff, can you is that the map, the one with the three towers? Is that part of this?
No, that's a different 3.5 module, which is really, really good that I do want to talk about later, called Expedition to the Ruins of Castle Greyhawk. I love that module. It is my second favorite 3.5 mod, well, maybe my third favorite behind the Shattered
Can
Gates
you
of Slaughterheart.
do me a solid real quick and just whip up that map of the three towers from the side with all the things underneath it?
Yeah, I could probably find that. Yeah. But really quick, before I do that, I want to let you guys know. So for those listening, these are the Crater Ridge mines. Map A, Map B, all that.
This is almost
Maps.
as bad as what you had me going through.
Yeah, Map C, Map D. Map E, Map F. Map G, Map H. Map I, Map J.
Wow.
Map K, Map L.
Does it go to Z? Goddamn.
Okay, so then when you're done with that, okay, so then there's the outer fane that you have to get through. All right, so you got the outer fane. There's all that. And then there's the inner fane, which I don't even know where that is. It's around here somewhere. There's the inner fane. And then when you get done with the inner fane, then you have to go through the black spike, and that's 9 levels, right? So after you get done with the 9 levels of the black spike, then you can go to the recovered temple. And oh no, there's more to the recovered temple, and it goes even deeper. So you got to go even farther. And then you get to the real recovered temple. And then finally you get to the fire node,
Where
which,
are you supposed to heal in all of this?
yeah,
Like the
it's
average
insane.
party is going to run out of heals, be trying to barricade doors to not get like, and it's all one temple, right? It's all one temple slash mine. So the bad guys are going to be coming through. Like it seems very poorly thought out.
Yeah.
Like these mines could have been half a dozen separate dungeons instead of all one long dungeon.
Well, they are technically separate, but still, I mean, it's just a huge slog. It's insane.
I recognize quite a few of those levels, and considering the pace of the game and everything like that, I think cutting a lot of that out was the was the right move. Um,
Um yeah. Yeah, I feel that.
Um,
Um
but no, Lonnie, this is the cutaway of the stuff under Castle Greyhawk, and this isn't even all of it. Isn't even half of it.
all right. Well, I just wanted to point this out because this picture here, it has been making the rounds on Facebook
Really?
recently. And it's making the rounds as an actual legitimate site built like for like some king, and they're tossing it off as we've uncovered this as a real ruin somewhere in the world. And I just think it's hilarious that people are that dumb. They're like, yeah, oh no, it just makes total sense that this existed somewhere on Earth. Like
you're
they're
kidding.
literally, and they're labeled Tower of Magic, Tower of War, Tower of the Gig. Like you can read it. It's got all the wording. Like it's so bad that people are just that dumb. But so that part I really wanted to bring that up because that just made me laugh. But also like running through this, we were running through the Towers, the Gig, or whatever I believe is what we were doing, or the Tower of War.
Tower War, yeah.
Um, and I think that you said that my group did those first 2 floors or something that are showing right
You guys
there.
got down to so if you look on the right, you got down to 1, 2, 3. I think the fourth little area. No. You got down to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, you were on the sixth, the arena. That's where you got to. So
And
you were down at the very bottom of the Tower of War. Like you were just
yeah,
about to finish it.
and so like I mean it like these the way that this map is showing is just so it's not representative of the actual map that we walked through. It was so long. It took us like 6 long rests. It was just encounter after encounter, like these long hallways and huge turnarounds and cutbacks into the same room that we were already in. And it felt very sluggish, and I don't know, man. Like I feel like I like some people are all about that fight, you know what I mean? And I don't mind it. Like I'm good to sit around in a bar talking to the bartender for a 3 hour session, or be in a single fight for a 3 hour session. But at times, you're just like, man, it's been 3 days and it's been 3 weeks to have those 3 days of just slogging through this maze, especially when you've only got one session a week and 3 hours, maybe 2 hours to that session. Like long sluggish dungeons are a problem, and I think that that's one major problem that like comes from pre-built modules as a general rule.
Yeah.
And maybe that's just my opinion on pre-built modules because I don't use them and I do all my own custom stuff.
No,
But
I completely agree with you. I think that's one of the primary reasons why it's extremely important to kind of I guess broadcast the kind of game you're going to run ahead of time, or give with your players and ask them what kind of game they want to play, right? Because like if you got a bunch of players who just love dungeon crawling, then like, man, that's awesome. But if none of your players are really the dungeon crawling type and you're running a dungeon crawl, then that's not going to go very well.
it's not going to be great when you're dungeon crawling 4 out of 5 sessions and somebody made their character to entirely just be like the face and talk to people and stuff, and there's no instances where he can do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is kind of for both of you guys. So Lonnie for the Greyhawk game, or the Moat House dungeon that you did back when we were doing Oriental Adventures, and Charles for like the Crater Ridge Mines. Are there any encounters or anything that like happened in there that really stands out to you guys that you guys like still remember to this day, like good or bad?
Go ahead.
Well, quite of the one of the goods was was an encounter that I know you did when meeting the lady in the mine who was a powerful psionic entity, and encountering her was quite eerie. Um, yeah, I was visible at the time, but she knew where I was. I was like, okay, I was a ranger, and I was the only one with any any remote ability to move silently. Even the other invisible people were very loud. I was invisible and moved ahead, and yeah, it was quite eerie. Similarly, moving scouting out ahead and being not noticed by a dragon, and then leaving the room was quite, and telling the party like, yeah, we aren't going that way. Um, well, that's scouting ahead. The big fight near the gate where there was just massive amounts of enemies coming at us, and I was sticking on the wall because I had those spider slippers, spider climb slippers, and shooting down the hallway. That was pretty intense fight. Like a lot of really big encounters. So many encounters. I ended up pretty close to death. Oh, the mushrooms. Mushroom people who tried to kill me. Acted all friendly, and they were like, "Oh, here, take this gift." I was, do my best to be nice to them and everything like that, and they tried to turn me into a mushroom producing husk. Yeah, it was, it was fun. There are a number of pre-memorable encounters. Interesting story of giants. A lot of really tough fights in there, and I can see why. Apparently, prior to me joining that campaign, that the death rate was apparently pretty high.
Yeah, quite a few people died in that campaign. But we were playing it, in a very kind of spirit of 3.5 kind of way where, if you could get the money together, then you could be resurrected. It wasn't like your character dies and you're permanently dead. You could get resurrected. You just had to go find the cash.
death, as long as someone survives and is able to bring back bodies back, death is just another condition that needs to be solved with magic. Um, I mean, role play wise and player wise, it hits harder than that, but mechanically, it's just a condition that's death is just a condition. Um, uh,
Yeah, so I think yeah, I agree that like a lot of times people write off their characters when they die, and they really shouldn't, especially in Dungeons and Dragons, because it's not that hard, especially if you're doing like a quest, right? For I don't know, the church or a king or something, and your teammates bring you back, you know, it's nothing for a king to ask a random cleric to be like, ah, heal this guy. He was part of their team. They successfully did this mission for me. Like, bring him back. Like even if the party can't afford it, like if they were running a mission for someone important, that person can most likely afford it. Um, but as to go back to your question about memorable fights and the like that stick out for me, um there's a couple. um there's the fight where um the goddamn evil clerics were summoning those flaming skeletons, and I'm over here playing a monk with no weapon. So every time I punch one of these goddamn skeletons, I'm taking fire damage.
So
And
guess where those flaming skeletons came from?
the book of elemental evil.
Yep, this book right here. I'll take you to the page.
And finally, after almost dying to my own stupid attacks, I burning skeleton, there it is. After almost dying to my own stupid attacks, I grabbed a great axe off the ground and broke the head off of it. You're like, well, you just ruined a perfectly good +1 great axe so that I could use the shaft as a quarterstaff and stop hurting myself.
that's a very good point to players. If you're playing with natural attacks, unarmed attacks, and the like, have a backup. Have a quarterstaff or something like that, just so that you have the option to not touch the ooze or bar devil or what have you. Even if it's suboptimal and you're thinking, oh, I'll just punch because that's what I'm really, really good at. Uh, you want to be flexible in case there's a situation where your gimmick or thing you do isn't viable.
Oh, and it wasn't viable for like the first half of that campaign. It felt so bad. It got to the point where I was going to go into my next favorite encounter, um where my character got so mad that he couldn't hit things that he bought like 20 vials of holy water and 20 vials of acid and 20 vials of alchemist fire. And we were going through the next stage, and I was like, oh, burning skeletons, chuck holy water. And I just became a grenade throwing monk because I got tired of not being able to punch anything. And I was like, oh, look, a giant, like an orc or whatever. Like there was the orc leader who kept running away from us, and I kept friggin' pegging him with acid and fire, and he would run away because he was on fire and try to get to the next room and like let us fight what was ever in that room at the time, and it just kept going on like that for like 2 sessions.
I I've used burning skeletons quite a bit in different games. I do like them as enemies.
Yeah, they're really good. Them and also the Grell. Um, I pretty much put a Grell in every game that I've run for the past several years, and they are always terrifying.
Oh,
Is
is
that
this?
that tentacle monster thing with
Yeah,
the eyeball? Oh my
yeah,
god. Ooh,
yeah. They'll kill you.
get that
Oh,
shit out of here.
what was the creature in the water cave that came out and grabbed one of our players and almost ate him?
Oh, what
Like a
was
grill.
that? I think I think that was just like a giant octopus. It might have been like a dire octopus or a fiendish octopus, but I think it was just like a big octopus.
That was a hilariously, yeah, hindsight now that's over, that was a hilarious fight. At the
Yeah.
time it was quite tense, because I was in the way back because I was hit and hurt, and I kind of had to, play this kind of game. Do I, pull further back and start drinking potions or using wand to try to bring myself back up, or do I stay in the fight? And I decided to stay in the fight because another player had a really good chance of dying, and I you know I want to try to prevent player death when I can, as
Yeah.
as another
See,
player anyway.
speaking of this octopus thing, that reminds me of my actual favorite encounter, which wasn't even a combat encounter. Uh Me drowning in the river because I failed my swim check, like I failed my jump check and then failed my swim check like 9 times in a row.
Oh yeah, I remember that. That was awesome.
Gosh, that reminds one of my players. He was playing a fighter, and he put like some points. He got abled learner, and he put like some points in swim, and just all the imbalance and all this physical stuff as a fighter. And I kind of asked, "Oh, why are you doing that?" And he went, "Because I know you." Um, that made me laugh because he's right. Um, I do love my physical challenges and skill checks.
Yeah, I mean they're a big part of the game, right? And if you don't use them, then you
You're
know
just missing out.
yeah, your players don't have to account for stuff like that, and so it allows them to really focus, and then you know they're hyper focused and they're just beating everything that you throw at them. So it's a good way to kind of ensure that your characters are more rounded and can deal with a greater variety of things.
Yeah, you
Right.
want
Because
you want to challenge your players, and combat's not the only way to challenge them.
right, and you're gonna end up with those characters who are like, well, I put all of my points into knowledges and stuff, and you're like, well, you're gonna have a really hard time climbing this ladder, like, because it's time to climb, and they're chucking arrows at you, which makes it a you can't just take 10 and climb this rope ladder, like you got to climb it the hard way. Um, it actually, this it's funny because it's a little off topic. It's way off topic, but this this talk about skill checks reminds me of a friend of mine, uh, Kevin out there. He played a character called Toothy Bugbane, and he wanted this character to be a swashbuckler. And we were doing like this pirate themed thing using the Stormrack book, and um, he was making his character, and he was making this little kobold swashbuckler character, and he was leveling him up, and every time he leveled him up, he just punched the number into a little square on the thing, like erased it and put in the new number, erased it, put in the new number, erased it, put in the new number. Well, finally, one day, something happens and he's got to make a balance check. And he's like, I got this shit, boy. I got 16 balance. I'm so good. I'm going to be the best. I'm going to get through this no problem. And then he realizes that he was putting his skill points into bluff the whole time, not balance.
Well, he could bluff you into thinking that he's good at balancing.
Right.
And so he failed this balance check. But after that point, he became the diplomat of the group because he was just like, I'm just gonna. He's like, I screw it. I'm gonna roll with it. This is
Yeah,
how I am now. Like I'm the biggest liar in the group.
I
that's awesome.
I have a balanced story as well. It was one of my first games with Cliff. Actually, Cliff was game mastering. It was in AmeriCorps. Cliff mentioned that in another video. But I was playing Paladin. I play a lot of Paladins. I like them. But we we're trying to get across this large gap. One player had like a tree trunk they moved over and put down there. He was a really big half-orc fighter kind of character. And my paladin, I just, kind of hugged it with my body and like shimmied across it, because, that's safe. And the monk wanted to show off. And so they tried bouncing across it. And Cliff, it gave that player so many chances, but the dice they were just really determined of making this monk fail. Um, fail all of his balance checks. He rolled like a lot of like ones and twos trying to get across this. I think Cliff gave him like a reflex save, try to grab it as before he fell, and he fell down the chasm. We later found him, and he had like a ring that we never figured out what was up with that. But that was just a series of unfortunate events of a character who should have been good at something, but the dice just decided that they were going to fail.
And that's how it goes down sometimes. And I think the takeaway, or one takeaway that I have from this little piece of the conversation that we've had, is if you're going to run one of these modules and you're going to try to run it quasi as written, it differentiate it. Don't make it just one long dungeon slog. Put stuff in there that's totally outside of combat. Put skill related stuff. Put social encounters. And that's what I ended up having to do with this Return to the Temple of Elemental Evil. I had to just throw the story away. So the story that you played through there, Charles, it's nothing like the story in Temple of Elemental Evil. In my game, I replaced Tharzadun with this character called the Psychic Overlord, and I basically just stole the story of the Black Company. Like I just read the Black Company and just threw out everything and replaced it with the Black Company. So it kind of turned into this big military style campaign where the characters had to go out on missions, and they were going back and forth between all these towns, and they were interacting with like the leadership of the towns, and there were like shady organizations in the towns that they had to deal with. And so like they'd go back and forth from the dungeons. But I think in that game we did have a pretty good ratio of like dungeon crawling to non-dungeon crawling. And then I just threw away a lot of the dungeon as well, because I do think that in this game, if you tried to run it as written, it would just turn into a huge slog.
Yeah, it would take, like you said, when you're only playing 3 hours or 4 hours a week, it would you could stay in the same kind of area plot wise for months, and that's not very satisfying. You want to break it up. You can have sessions of nothing but combat, even several sessions in a row with just one massive encounter after the other.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I kind of enjoy those.
Yeah, those are kind of fun when you're playing entire combat for 3 hours. But you do need to break it off with some kind of story, role play, related interactions, just to or even just make it feel like you're progressing or striving towards something. Maybe you throw hints of that or like, but not one room after the other, because ideally you kind of want players to be able to go everywhere so they can get all the stuff, so they can better fight the encounter. But if the players start beelining just because the players just want to get on with it, then the dungeon is too long and monotonous.
Yeah, if you're getting to that situation where your characters are just like zoned out, then it's time to stop the crawl and move on to something else.
Right. Or like and it's really funny because back in when I was in college. I talked about this during a different episode. Charles, you weren't here, but we had this huge game going with like 16 players, 24 sometimes, two DMs, two rooms side by side, going all day from like 8 o'clock in the morning to like 6 o'clock or 8 o'clock at night, in the college library, where we kind of had two DMs that rotated their classes, like three DMs that rotated their classes, in such a way that there was always at least one or two DMs on and a bunch of players there sitting down playing. Um, and sometimes, people would get tired of like of a dungeon crawl that happened to be going on that they've been being a part of for, a while. And so we had this kind of rule that like if you got up and you went to the other room, your character just like teleported away, right? And ended up wherever the other group was. Um, and so people who were like, man, I don't feel like being in this dungeon anymore would just go and check on the other room and be like, oh, you guys are in a town hanging out like at a bar? Cool. I'm gonna come sit in on this and have some fun. So I mean, and that was just like that's kind of a unique situation. It doesn't really help a lot of people, but there's you got to remember it just goes to point out that you got to remember you can't just be forcing people.
Yeah,
They don't want to do that.
yeah, if it's not, if that's not their kind of game, don't force them to play that. Change it around. And I think that's a great thing to do. There's nothing wrong with just, saying, all right, this isn't working. Let's stop it right now and let's do, something that's going to be, fun.
Yeah, running large games as a game master it, there's a lot of difficulty in it for a variety of reasons. One of the big ones is that each individual player doesn't get a lot of uh, opportunity to role play, or to uh, interact with that kind of aspect and explore their characters as much as they might want to, as you can with smaller games. I have played games where you have only one player, one game master, and those are much more story heavy and story focused. And I find the fewer players are around, the easier it is to interact with the player's characters on a more personal level.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, I've definitely been in a situation where where me and a buddy wanted to just tell a story or something, and so we were just like, hey, let's play like a single player D&D game where I'll DM for you. I'll throw in an NPC character who kind of just follows you around and does whatever and helps you out. Uh, but that's like my character, but I'm not gonna like do anything really. I'm just gonna be there to like talk to you and do and like goof around. And it's been those games can be some of the fun, can be some of the funnest for sure. Uh, but like I said, the game was 16 players deep. Usually it was 8 players to a room, but on a more average basis, it was actually closer to 4 or 5 people in any given in either room, uh, because of people's classes. So they would just stand up, leave, go to their class. Their character would teleport out, unless they were in a combat, in which case the DM would take over their character for the combat. Um, and uh and so it was really still just 2 games of like 4 or 5 people, so it never felt sluggish like that. That's why we had 3 or 4 DMs that would rotate through and make sure we always had 2 rooms. It was very rarely ever 8 people or 10 people to a single session, because it does get to that point where you're taking 3 hours to do a round of combat, because everybody's one, you've got to go through, you know, Joe, Dick, Harry, Tom, Samantha, and Susan, and uh each of them is doing their turn, and then they get interrupted, or somebody wants to ask a question during their turn. And we had a lot of rules to kind of streamline all that stuff and make it run really smooth. But like I said, for the most part, it was because of the way classes worked out. It was only ever usually 4 or 5 people in either room.
And I think that's a good way to do it. So kind of going back to the review that I'm referencing here, this RPG.net review by
Back to this.
by Alan D. Kohler. I just wanted to kind of finish it off with, so he says value for money, a 4. Um, it's just stuffed with stuff, and I agree. This thing is, your value for money is just fantastic. I mean, I'm never going to have to roll up another NPC. I love the starting town of Hamlet. It is great. The NPCs are great. It's got everything you need. The starting dungeon, the Moat House, is fantastic. I've used it as a starting dungeon in 2 separate campaigns now, and I will probably use it again. So it's awesome. So in overall, he gives it a 4, and I'm tempted to agree. For much of the same reasons. I love this book as a source book. I love it as a reference, or I love it as reference material for like NPCs, monsters, encounters, magic items. I really, really like the new prestige classes in here. There's one called like the Doom Dreamer, and you get insanity points, and the more insane you are, the more crazy stuff you can do, and the better your saves get, and the better your abilities get. There's the madness domain, there's the force domain. So there's a lot of really good stuff in here. But yeah, again, just if you try to run this thing as written, it's almost impossible. I cannot recommend trying to pick this up and just trying to like run it as is right out of the box. I would much more highly recommend it as like a big sandbox, right? So if you put together your little sandbox and you just use stuff from this book and from other pre-published 3.5 modules to just populate that sandbox.
Yeah, having played a modified version as this, I'd have to agree. There is just yeah, it's very, and it's tough to kind of recommend a adventure path book when you can't just pick it up and play it as it is. But there is a lot of, on the other hand, there is a lot of really good stuff in it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the general gist. So just kind of to end off, with my general thoughts on this particular module, the pros. So these are the things that I think are really, really good about this module. It's a great resource for encounters. There's a lot of good stuff in there. It's got a great intro dungeon, the Moat House. It's got an excellent starting village, Hamlet. It is super comprehensive. It's got a lot of traps. It's got a lot of good locations, a lot of good encounters, just a lot of really good stuff that you can pull from it. The old temple, like there's this big encounter in there called the Old Temple, and that was epic when we ran it. It was just absolutely insane. It was this huge, like almost like army style battle where they were moving troops around. It was totally crazy. If you ran that with I think it's called Heroes of Battle or the Tome of Battle, the one that introduces the mass combat rules, I think that would be really fantastic. And the last thing was that characters from the original Temple of Elemental Evil, they return. So you've got like Lareth, you've got Hedrak, you've got Spugnor. So you've got other characters. So if you played the original, it would be a good idea to kind of, it would be cool to kind of see those characters again. However, this particular module does come with a lot of downsides. Number one being it is too long. It is just too long. It is just way too long, way too dungeon crawly. You really just have to pick and choose what you want to use out of this book. Because if you tried to run it as written, it would just be, I mean, I don't even know how long it would take. We'd probably still be playing it right now if I if I ran it, as is.
Is it
Um,
supposed to be a 1 to 20 campaign?
4 to 14.
I mean, that doesn't seem like it should be that long, but
It's
They found a way.
yeah, if you tried to just go through every single one of these encounters as they are listed in the book, it would just be insane. Um, Another thing that is really problematic with the book is that the story makes no sense. The chapter one is really good. Like chapter one's a good setup. It's very solid. You return to Hamlet. There's a moat house. You take out the moat house. That's great. Everything beyond that is just a nonsensical mess. So you just really need to throw it out and come up with your own stuff. It requires heavy modification in order to be playable. And the thing that I see this module kind of slagged on the most is if you were looking for a fulfilling conclusion to the original Gygaxian story, like the original Temple of Elemental Evil, this is not it. Uh, it has conflicting information. A lot of the characters are different than they are in the original, and they don't act the same way. And there's just a whole lot of stuff that doesn't make any narrative sense. So if you were really like if your group loves the original and they want to return to it, um, you would need to make modifications. But I think that's really about the long and the short of what I have to say about this particular module. Was there anything else that you guys wanted to kind of touch on before we kind of move on to the next section?
no,
I
no. I mean, as far as the module goes, I think that's what we discussed talking about.
I'd like to say from our experience with the climax of the campaign, it was it was very intense with the way you ran it. And yeah, it's it's a very intense game, and I did like it, and I'm glad that you end up cutting out quite a large chunk of it and added some a lot more story and stakes to it.
That's what I was trying to do. So I'm kind of glad it worked out that way in the end because I really did enjoy that game. I thought it was a lot of fun, and I finally got to run this thing that I wanted to run for a long time. And I think the main takeaway from this is if you're a GM and you're using pre-published stuff, don't be afraid to change what doesn't work.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely it.
yeah, I think that that's a good segue into that next thing that we were going to talk about with like Roll20 and stuff. Are we good to move on to that or
Yeah, do it up. I'll just give you the reins and you go ahead and take off.
um yeah, so this is me making a hot take about the state of Roll20 uh and start playing and um paid to play versions of games. Now I understand that people like myself, like I was a forever GM. I love playing D&D, and I just never really get to play D&D. And I thank Cliff every day that he ran the campaign for us because I never get to be a player. I have always been the GM. I've always had to like weasel an NPC character in there that I'm kind of controlling myself, but not really helping and do anything, which makes me feel like an idiot. Um, so I understand like sometimes you just want to play the game, right? But and all you but you know that there's a huge calling out there for GMs because not nobody wants because everybody wants to play and nobody wants to GM, right? So it's totally like, in my opinion, acceptable to be like, hey, if you want to play in a game, right, I'm going to be charging you I'm a pretty good DM. I've got some reviews. People look at my stuff. They're like, hey, you do good work or whatever, right? If you've got those kind of reviews and stuff to back you up, charge your $15 a session per person. Because you're doing a 3 hour session, that's only $5 an hour per person. That's not that much money. If you're running 4 people, you're making $20 an hour. That's barely a better than minimum wage in California. I get that. I totally understand that. But if you are running a pre-constructed game from a box that you didn't put any goddamn work into, and you were just reading stuff off of a book that came in a box and using maps that came in a box, I don't think it's appropriate to charge $15, to charge $20 a session. Especially since most of those pre-constructed things like that are meant to be played over 3 or 4 sessions. So assuming that you're running, I don't know, Icewind Dale, whatever the new Icewind Dale one was that came out a while back for 5e. And it's supposed to be run over 4 or 5 campaign sessions. I mean, that seems like a lot of money, right? That's $20. Say, excuse me. Say you're running $20 a session, you got 4 people, 5 people, even you got, so that's $25 an hour, 3 hours a session over 4 sessions. That's 75, couple $100, a few $100, right? And then you just do that twice a day, with 2 groups, 3 days a week, 4 days a week, and you got yourself a full-time job. But you're not doing anything. And like, it's offensive almost as someone who never uses a pre-con, like pre-constructed thing, and writes all of my own story and writes and like I don't necessarily always find my own maps. Like, I was running a Dark Sun campaign for Cliff where I was using the original Dark Sun maps, and I had found original like maps for all the cities and stuff. So it was maps that weren't mine, but the story was mine, and the dungeons, were dungeon maps that I had found, that I, put all the doors in myself. I did all the work to make it, put in the dynamic lighting and all that stuff myself. And I couldn't get 4 people to save my life. I couldn't get 4 people to play that game for $5. I was offering it for $5 a session and couldn't get 4 people to play that game. So it's astounding that people are willing to pay, and it's offensive to me, at least, that people are willing to pay $20 a session for a pre-constructed like game. And I don't know, like, that's just it. Like, it feels bad because I do all custom work, and I feel like it gets overshadowed by these pre-constructed box sets that people see out there.
I gotcha.
In defense, playing devil's advocate here of that, when people are paying for these modules, there is the society, social aspect of it. Like, oh, you played the Ravenloft game. Oh, I did too. What's your story? And that you kind of have shared stories that you both understand and interact with the community, and they are also more aware of the kind of quality they expect as well. If they say, like, if someone says, oh, I'm running this published game, people understand that there's probably going to be some polish and the like to it, where they don't know you and
Right.
what you rent, and you're a question mark of uncertainty.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and that's what I was trying to get at. Is like, for me, like, it sucks because I put in a lot of work into this Dark Sun campaign. Cliff, I mean, you played it. You played
I love
the
that
first
game.
like
That game
the
was
first
fantastic. It was deadly. It was crazy. The group was great. It was
it
awesome.
felt Dark Sunny, um like, and so, like, I put a lot of work into it, and it never got off the ground. And because it never got off the ground, I never was able to get anybody to review it. I was never able to get anybody to review me as a DM on Roll20. And so I was like, okay, well, that sucks, and now I'm like, okay, well, it feels like I got to go out there and I've got to do, you know, put this game out there that I put all this work into for free for, you know, a group, and then run it, and then run it again, and then run it again, and then run it again, you know, 4 or 5 times for 4 or 5 groups for free, in the hopes that eventually I'll get, you know, reviewed or whatever, to the point where I could be like, hey, I'm charging $5 a person and get, you know, 4 people to come in. And I get the social aspect that you were talking about, Charles. Like, it is always fun to be like, hey, yeah, you did this Ravenloft campaign and I did the Ravenloft campaign. How was our campaigns different, or how are they the same? But I feel like they would be more the same than not the same, based on, because they are pre-constructed modules, right? I feel like sharing the crazy stories from custom campaigns that were written by, you know, my friends and stuff always are way better stories than stories I hear about pre-constructed games.
Yeah,
Yeah,
100%. Just to kind of throw my 2 cents in there, I should probably preface what I'm about to say with just some kind of information about me. So I'm not really, I don't really know anything about the pay to play scene. I've never paid for a game of D&D. I've never charged for a game of D&D. That's not something that I've ever been interested in. D&D is it's my hobby, you know.
Right.
And I really like, I've got, you know, I've usually got a game, you know, one weekly game that, you know, that I get to play as either a GM or a player. And really outside of that, I usually don't have the time to get into that stuff. Um, but um, I definitely see what you're saying about, you know, creating all the stuff yourself, because when I first started playing D&D, I always wrote my own stuff, and I really looked down my nose at pre-published modules. You know, I would look at them and be like, that, like, real GMs don't use that. You know, like a real GM
Right.
writes
That's
their own stuff.
exactly what I'm talking. Yeah.
same.
Okay.
Yeah, and you know, and as I went on, and as I kept playing, you know, I picked up my first module, which was Expedition to Castle Greyhawk, and I ran that over the course of a couple of years. And you know, it taught me a lot of things about encounter design and about, you know, city building, and you know, just all this different. So I didn't run it as was. I put it into my already running campaign, and I changed a lot of it. But um, I've kind of come to the conclusion now that using pre-published modules is a great way to just, you know, to get like a setting in a box, you know, like,
Hmm.
here's a city, here's a dungeon, here's some stuff going on, you know, just run with it. And whatever direction the players choose to go in, totally fine. Just go in that direction.
Right.
And
Yeah. Sorry, I
and
don't mean to cut you off. Go
no, that's
ahead.
fine. But just to end off my little tangent here is, you know, uh, you know, personally, Lonnie, I think you're a super good DM. I'd be, you know, glad to review your stuff on Roll20. And if there is anybody out there that is, you know, that is into the pay to play scene, um, you know, I can't personally think of anybody else that I would rather, um, you know, play in a game. I think your stuff is pretty fantastic, and if you're into that stuff, then, you know, check Lonnie out.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the holler out about that. I mean, and it's not like, this isn't me just trying to plug either. This is more about the fact that I just believe that, yeah, these box sets are great. Like, and like you said, you have that book that you pull your encounters from now. And even I asked you for it, you know, because like it's a great list of encounters. Having things built for having things ready to go for random like characters and stuff is always great. um but at the same time, you know, like, when you're like, it's a different story to be like, oh man, I want to just do this free flowing open campaign setting, and be like, this is just us goofing around, which is where, in my aspect, my like thought processes on it, if I was going to do something like that, it would be it would be free. You know what I mean? I wouldn't be charging for that. It would be like, I've got maps, I've got things, I'll pick what map I need at the time. I'll grab a random encounter at the time to fit and throw in there. But that's just a very more free flowy, friendly type of game. Whereas in like the Dark Sun campaign, you know, I kind of had a story I wanted to cover. I kind of had these dungeon ideas where I would have appreciated you guys to go, and you know, like good players, you did the thing. You went where you were supposed to go instead of turning around and wandering off into the desert and going somewhere completely different. Um, you know, and for the DMs that are making essentially writing their own pre-made campaign in a box, from the ground up with an actual story and actual dungeons that the players are intended to go to rather than just free flow around the map however they want. Those kinds of games I feel like should be the kinds of games that people charge for, because they take a lot more effort than your free flow game or than an actual standard box set.
I got you. I got you. So I think we'll kind of start winding down at this point. But Lonnie, if anybody did want to get a hold of you for games, either paid or otherwise, what would be like a good place to do that?
My Roll20 is, you know, my account on there is Lonnie Morris. So the display name is Lonnie M. You can find me there. Uh, I'm on Twitch under Drake and Runeblade. You can message me there. My Discord name is also Drake and underscore Runeblade. So you can reach me at Drake and underscore Runeblade on Discord. Just send me a friend request, and you know, I'll probably answer it and be like, "Who this?" And you know, just be like, "Hey, I'm looking for a game," and I'm down to run. I I don't do anything right now. I have 24 hours a day, 7 days a week open available to me. I am looking to run a campaign. I am looking to play in campaigns. So like if you guys are interested, it's out there. Like I'm here for that. Like I'm down. Let's do this.
Awesome stuff. And Charles, was there anything that you wanted to plug or say, or any ideas that you think we didn't get a chance to touch on already?
Uh, well, I'm a Greasy Duck exclusive, um,
That is true.
but yeah, but yeah, just yeah, when I started D&D, I also made my own maps and everything like that. And while I do own a number of modules and adventure paths, I'm actually recently running my actual first one. Um, I've had so many of them, and I was playing in person, but running it on Roll20, there's definitely some pros and cons. Big on personally big on history, and I like making maps and the like. But a point that I'm really lacking is names. That's definitely a game master weakness of mine. I'd say we all have pros and cons, but yeah, I think players.
When the players ask you the random bartender's name that you're supposed to remember for 4 sessions.
Yeah, yeah, and I have some stories about these NPCs with, like, a lot of times I'll be like, oh, the smith, the mayor, without actually having like a name for that individual person that
Right.
they ask. Like I'll end up with like a name like William, if that like a NPC like a nobody NPC actually does like to help him out and things like that. Very common generic names. But the the running modules and everything like that, it can help a player or a game master, figure out some things that they're maybe lacking in their games. Like maybe they don't do a lot of traps, or throw way too many hobgoblins at party at once and kill the sorcerer in the first turn that you needed to get a sleep stool off and spiral out of control. And yeah, you get better over time, but a module is kind of safe thing for new game masters to run. Even though I myself started with my own, my own stuff, I can see why starting with a module would be or could be quite useful. Just don't.
I agree that the modules have a place. Like I said, I refer to fifth edition as baby's first tabletop because it is like 3.5 light. It is very it's its own version of D&D. It's very easy to get into and stuff. And so, you want to learn how to play a tabletop RPG for the first time, pick up fifth edition, pick up the Icewind Dale or the Ravenloft or whatever, random campaign setting, and run through one of those. That's totally great. I just don't think that people should be charging for it.
Totally understandable.
Yeah, it's kind of strange that we're living in a day and age now where people, game masters are, charging for their games. It's very, very fascinating to me.
Yeah, I never even knew that was a thing. I didn't even know you could do
Oh
that.
yeah, no, like people there are people that make their living. They run, 3 games a day and they're charging $20. They got 6 players. They're, because they're running full 6-man teams. I mean, at $20 a player a day, or like a session, right? For a 3-hour session, you got 6 players. That's $180 for divided by 3. That's $60 an hour. You know what I mean? So you're doing $60 an hour for 6 hours, maybe 8 hours a day. You run 2 or 3 sessions back to back because they're running them like that. You only have to work 2 or 3 days a week, and then you're making minimum wage, or you're making more than minimum wage, and then you just got to pay your own taxes off of that. But like, there are lots of GMs out there that are doing this full time, like just getting paid to play. And that's the other part about it, right? Is you're playing the game. You're doing what you love to do. It's your hobby. It's now your job. That's the dream, right? That's the dream. People want to be video game streamers, not because they want to be streamers and famous. They just want to get paid to play video games. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I don't know. That's just another little rant. Sorry.
No, that's cool. That's cool. All about finding that audience and just making it happen. So that's pretty awesome, and I think that's about all the time we've got for today. So we touched on a lot of stuff today, but I think there are some takeaways in there. And again, if you do want to reach out to us, just throw a message at the YouTube channel, or put a comment down below, and we may very well put your question on the next video's mailbag. So
Yeah.
for the D&D 3.5 book club, I've been Cliff. Today I've been joined by Charles and Lonnie, and we will see you on the next one.